All right, so I just wanted to make a really quick intro to how you might collect your data, how many trials you might do, how do you make your data table, just so that people don't find out later that they maybe should have set this up differently. And I know that some people feel really confident doing this, working with spreadsheets. So, some people might want to either watch this really quickly or maybe you feel totally ready to collect your data. And so this is just to allow some structure for people who might need a little bit more. Um, so I can show you so we've got the gizmo, right? And then you've also got all these different net logo. But the nice thing about these simulations is that there's multiple things that you can change. So you do have to make some decisions about the settings that you're going to use in your investigation. So what I plan to give you guys, and actually, might just yeah, what is kind of a basic template in case you need that kind of a structure. So something like this, and you could say, oh, I'm going to write these in later, right? But you might just want to pick out right, these are the things that we could control. So we have number of people, we have the disease type that we can change, we have probability of transmission, and then we have masks or not. So these are basically the things that we have the ability to change. And similarly, right, in this one, the variables that we could change are number of people, infectiousness, chance of recovery, duration. This is just how you visualize the data. So these are going to give you options for an independent variable, right? What do you want to change to see if there's an effect on something that you can measure? And so you might just say, yeah, I'm actually going to pick the number of people. Does this have any sort of an effect on something that you're going to measure? So for this one, right, there aren't many other things that you can control. But so here's where you're then going to, if you're testing the number of people, you'll have to control everything else. But you'll have to make a decision about, do you want to pick a foodborne illness or a person-to-person illness, right? There might be one of those that's more interesting to you. And then a probability of transmission, you will have to justify, why did you pick 50%? Why did you pick 25, 30%? And so you could, for this investigation, you could maybe just research, like, what are some common transmissibilities of, some foodborne illnesses? Or you could just say, I wanted something that wasn't 100% going to transmit to the next person, but something super low, 10%, right, is very unlikely, but could. And again, like, this might be somebody might really want to use that as their independent variable. And then, I might say students wearing masks, like, I'm going to do no masks. And then I might just start mine at 50%. But to really know what settings you want to use for control variables, you might want to run this a couple times. And so here's where, if you press control, you can see you'll have some data that you can export. So you've got time, and then you've got these numbers. So think about what you want to choose as your dependent variable, right? What are you measuring? And so here, this will give you some ideas, right? Your dependent variable could be the number of healthy individuals, I think it's funny, this is number of people infected with the foodborne illness, and then number of foodborne ill, right? These number of people, and then these are going to be the people that are infected in a person-to-person. So you've got some different ways to collect your data, but keep in mind too that, this is some interesting, right? You could pick a moment in time. You could say, I'm just going to select the number of people infected at 20 hours. But what will give you more information is so you could use all of these data points. And, here's where I know that not everybody has the same experience with, working with sheets, but you could export this so this is a file that I can use in Google Sheets. You can upload that to Google Sheets and work with it, right? You could copy and paste this data directly because you have a lot of good data here. Time, number of healthy individuals, and number of ill people. I might even just say like, I don't necessarily need the healthy people. Maybe I just want to know about infections over time. So I might just use that as my dependent variable. So this might help you kind of set up, here's what I'm changing, here's what I'm measuring, and you probably want to decide what values of the independent variable are you going to use. And so I'm going to reset this up so that I can change this. So I could say, all right, look, I could use anything from 5 people to 40 people. And so maybe oftentimes if you want to really see a pattern, you probably want to select 5 different values of your independent variable. So, I might just select something here like I'm going to use 5, 15, 25, 35, 45. And that might give me a good spread to actually see how does the number of people affect. To understand for how long you need to run your trials, you might want to try this with 5 people and just see what happens. And I kind of liked this graph over time. So when I have 5 people, right, you can kind of get an idea like, okay, all 5 were infected by 20 hours. And so now I might want to understand what happens if I reset this, but then I have 45 people. Oh, I can't do 45. All right, let's say 40. So now I just want to see like what's that going to look like if I have 40 people, just to understand for how much time do I want to run every trial. And so if you just start and you don't have an understanding of how long this will take, right? So this one is taking longer to infect more people. But notice too that this pattern in the graph is probably something that I really want to figure out. There might be something different going on in the very beginning of the illness compared to the end. So most of mine are infected by, actually they're all infected by, here's where you can go back to your table, right? All of mine were infected by 67 hours. So I know that my total time that I might want to do this, I might want to look at something up until, 60, that seems like a lot though. So maybe 20 hours to 60 hours, something like that. Okay, so here's where, if these are my variables, right? This, and I kind of wanted to have us like brainstorm how to do this together, but since I'm not here, you probably want to repeat this a couple of times at least. And honestly, this is our first time doing this. It might be fine to just do 3 repeats, but if your independent variable here is number of people, right? So I'm going to have the 5 people. I want to repeat this a couple times just because with 5 people, you also saw that there was some kind of random nature to who was infected. So I would at least start this with 3 trials. And if you decide that you need more for one of them, we can go back and do this later as you're adding more data. So again, what was my number of, so I was going to do 5, 15, 25, right? So I can do 15, 25. And then part of the point of this too is to just get people in, Google Sheets, kind of working with this a little bit more. And then you can decide, is there like, do you want to color this away that's going to make this easier to keep track of? That is something that you can kind of do later if this, meant to do a different color, if this helps. Okay, so then here's where, right, it makes sense to start at time 0, right? How many people were infected? And then you can decide, do I want to measure this every 5 hours or every 10 hours? Like you want to get enough data points where you can actually look at that trend. So you might say, this is going to be time in hours, and I want to do you can also do this. If you decide you want to do this by 5s, if you click and drag this, like it will just, it didn't do it. That's weird. It usually does, but oftentimes it'll continue that pattern. So never mind. It doesn't do that. Okay. So as you start collecting your data, so this is just to give you an idea of kind of where to start to collect your data about your question. You could either, right, you could just get these from your table. But this is interesting. They didn't necessarily come up with the same. So I might, say, okay, they're measuring every 2 hours. Like, is that the data that I want? So yeah, they've got 5.1. So never mind. You might have to kind of work with what they have here. But I guess you could just use these data points. You could change yours to, okay, now I'm going to measure at 5.1. But the idea is you've got increments of time, and then you would record, how many people were infected at time 0. It was 0. Time 5.1. It is 17. So you have the option of recording the points from your graph. 15 was 24 were infected. But actually, this is my 40 people, I think. Anyway, hopefully you get the point of just how to start this. And then we can talk a little bit more on Wednesday about once you have all your data, organizing your chart, but also graphing your data, right? If you feel really confident with Google Sheets, feel free to export this and use this CSV file. But you're going to have a lot more data. It'll save you from typing things in. But yeah, you'll have a lot more data that you're working with here. But totally, you're welcome to do that if you feel really comfortable doing that. Okay, so hopefully this gets you started with the collection of data, and then we can check in more thoroughly on Wednesday to make sure that people are on the right track.